Because there are definitely Republicans who enjoyed Barbie, and I'm sure there are Democrats who enjoy Yellowstone. But as a whole, I think this gets to a broader point. That we are becoming more polarized, not just politically, but through our politics, we are becoming more polarized with what we consume.
The central message, I think, of episodes 1 through 3 is to be wary of increasing totalitarianism and increasing authoritarianism. Be wary of anti-democratic things.
You didn't know what they thought of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. It didn't matter. It did not matter. You were united together, watching Star Wars, dressed up like children, eating popcorn. Welcome to Our Great Experiment. I'm Daniel Egamo. Today, I am really lucky to be able to share this conversation with you. I sat down and spoke with one of my best friends, Dawson Doyen, and we talk about a range of issues, everything from the politics of Star Wars to the rise in loneliness in the United States, the decline of community and civic organizations, to Superman and its influence today. And one thing I hope you'll be able to tell from watching this is just how close of a friendship that I have with Dawson. And I'm really lucky to be able to have that friendship because he's truly one of the best people I know. He's not a partisan, he's not an ideologue, and I think that shows in this conversation. He's truly interested in what everyone has to say and building spaces of collaboration and positive intellectual discussions with anyone and everyone, regardless of their politics, their viewpoints, or their backgrounds. Now, I must say this conversation is quite different than the existing conversations to this point on this platform, and that is welcome. If you are watching this, I hope you listen to this conversation and realize, oh, maybe I have something to contribute. So just know that all viewpoints and all topics of conversation are welcome on this platform, and I really hope you find something interesting in this one. I know that I sat with the topics that Dawson and I conversated on for a lot of time after our meeting wrapped up. As always, my email is ourgreatexperiment2025@gmail.com. Dawson, how you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How about you?
I'm doing really good. It's been a busy day, but I'm so happy to be sitting down with you for, I think, what's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. As excited to have this conversation as you are. We had a really great sort of correspondence, both over the phone and over text, about just kind of going over ideas and different avenues that could be explored and taken. So I think based on what we have talked about off the air is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I've spent the last couple of days thinking a lot about what I wanted to talk to you about. And in addition, I've been thinking a lot about community. Community is one of the most important aspects of politics today, whether we see it or not. And where we have shared spaces in the modern age, I think is super important. Because when you think about the shared spaces that occupy not only political life, but cultural life, pop culture, it's almost all online. And I've been thinking about the scholarly work that's been done on this too, this concept of social capital, this idea that connections you form through individuals, through social networks, it helps you build trust between people. And that trust makes it easier to look aside differences and work together towards common goals. And it just so happens that today I was sitting in seminar and I was assigned a paper, and this was not planned, but I was assigned a paper by Robert Putnam, who is a famous political scientist who is known for a book he wrote in 2000 called Bowling Alone. Now, a lot of people have never read that book, but a lot of people have heard of that book because it is very important. In that book, Putnam writes about the concept of social capital, and he distinguishes between two different kinds of social capital, bonding and bridging. To distinguish, Bonding is a social capital of sorts that ties like identitarian groups. It's homogenous groups, right? And Putnam doesn't say that those ties are not important. But the other type of social capital, bridging social capital, this is the capital that ties together diverse groups of people. People who have no common identity are brought together through various organizations, whether it's churches, baseball leagues, bowling leagues, anything of that sort. Putnam argues is crucial to democracy. So I'm curious, when you think of these spaces, whether it's churches, movie theaters, what what role do you think these organizations play in building trust between Americans?
Well, that is certainly a very heavy question. I think you're a master of considering a lot of different angles for the sake of trying to figure things out. You know, trying to understand more about central problems and central issues. So, I think that with this question, with the existence of shared spaces, I think what's important, most important, excuse me, to realize is that yes, there isn't just one shared space. There isn't just one uh, church. There isn't just one place of entertainment. There isn't just one sporting venue. That's so they are built essentially on communities themselves. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about, you know, a town that's got 10,000 people or a town uh, that's got 500,000 people, whatever. Uh, no matter the size of the population, no matter the size of the community, no matter the type of people or the kind of people that inhabit those communities, you are still going to find those places, just like you said, whether it's a bowling alley with a bowling league or uh, some dive bar. I play darts every week, so some local bar that has a couple of dartboards in it that they do dart leagues out of. So no matter the size or no matter the kind of place, you can find these communal spaces, and I think that is the most important thing that uh, you asked earlier with the kickoff question, like what do you make of these shared spaces? And I think the most important thing to realize about them is that no matter no matter what the external circumstances may be, those places still exist in some capacity. So they have kind of a timeless nature to them, or a timeless uh, circumstance to them. And I think we need to examine that further.
I'm glad you mentioned these places still do exist because it might be easy to think they don't. I have notes prepared. I'm going to use Pew Research a lot in this conversation. In 1972, Pew asked Americans, what what percentage of you essentially, how many of you think that Americans can be trusted? And in 1972, we think of low trust today, but in 1972, Pew found that only 46% of Americans said that most Americans could be trusted. 46. That number in 2018 was 34%. And in this same period, from the 60s on, civic organizations, clubs, churches, all of this has declined. And so I'm curious, Putnam argues that these are critical for democracy, right? Because if we only have spaces to think about our differences and not these spaces to think about our commonalities, then that's going to lead to further polarization, further division. In your experience, though, do you find that these really aren't on the decline? Is Putnam wrong? Or in your experience, have you noticed um, these spaces still being widely shared, widely accessible to Americans?
I think the answer to that question lies in the regionality of it, if that's the right term, because living where I live now and growing up where we both grew up, we are accustomed to a certain kind of community, and in that kind of community, there is certain shared spaces. Uh, most of the population of where we live and where we have lived has been blue collar. People in the trades. Uh, um, and there has been big business. So there is a combination of like blue collar workers and white collar workers and tradesmen and industrial workers like that. So we were used to that, and because that is the major sort of conglomerate of people in our community, we are used to the a certain kind of communal spaces available to us. A lot of those places, um, we frequent both for pleasure and for business otherwise. Like we were just talking about leagues. One of the biggest sort of communal hangout spaces that I can think of in our area, in my area specifically, is just pool halls and bars and sports bars and restaurants and things like that. Like those types of places are frequented, I feel like, most by the people that live in the communities where we're from. Uh, so, like, I can imagine, you can walk down the street and ask anybody, "Hey, what are you doing this Friday?" "Oh, I'm going down to, so and so sports bar. I'm going to watch the game." Or, "Oh, I'm going down to so and so hole in the wall place. So we're going to have a couple of drinks and just, talk and do whatever." Uh, so I think coming where we come from, we are accustomed to a type of community hangout and what kind of places those are. But I'm sure as you go across the country to the East Coast or the West Coast, sure there might be some regional commonalities to be found, but those places largely are probably going to change based on the area in which you live and the type of people and the kind of people that live there. That doesn't change the fact that those places can be found, as we've established, but it just might change the kind of activity and the kind of fervor. Fervor is not the right word, but I guess activity is the right word. The kind of activity that would befall those places. So like you find somewhere in Seattle on the West Coast, a lot of people that's tied to uh, a lot more coastal stuff, right? Fishing and stuff like that. And I'm sure those places are kind of the same. There's bars, restaurants, whatever. Of course there is. But the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is no matter what the regional differences are, there is going to be those communal spaces, and I just wanted to tie back into the area that we are most familiar with, South Dakota and the small communities that inhabit that kind of shapes how we look at things and how the larger community looks at things. So, depending on where you go, I'm sure that's a different story. But I guess I don't know.
Well, I get a sense listening to you that there's a certain level of optimism, right? Or at least not a feeling of hopelessness when it comes to these spaces. Because it can be super easy if you're chronically online to feel as though young people simply have no place to go, right? No place to go out and interact and socialize. But it's not just you that I've gotten this sense of optimism from. I've talked to young people as well on a university campus in Missouri, and I get that same sense. I was just speaking to a student the other day who told me that she felt that young people weren't oblivious to this fact, right? They weren't oblivious to this fact that we were raised uh, in a declining social capital world, but that maybe there's a change coming. Maybe young people recognize this and are intentionally seeking out these changes. But taking that all aside, let's say Putnam and other scholars are right about the dire warning signs of a lack of community and lack of these social organizations that really tie us together. If we're thinking about the causes, what exactly has caused these trends, One could point to economic inequality. One could point towards political division. One could easily just point to technology in general, right? If there's no longer a need to meet in person, when you can just meet 12 hours apart from each other over a virtual meeting, why is there a point to get together in person? So, if, in your mind, what do you think? What's caused this decline in social community?
I would feel most comfortable saying that it is a combination of those factors. Yes, I'm not going to sit here and dispute the fact that technology is not a greatly contributing factor. Technology and the level of access that people have to technology, whether it's cell phones or laptops or smart TVs or uh, smart homes. You can control your home in the inner climate from pieces of technology. Every piece of our lives is influenced in some way by a piece of technology. Um, it's like, yeah, if you want to look at the news, you don't have to turn on the TV. You don't have to buy a newspaper. You can look at it on your phone. Um, if you need to go to the grocery store but you don't have a list made, you can shop online and you can make grocery lists online and you can have those people shop for you and go pick them up in person, right? So regular, formerly regular, I guess, aspects of our lives, everyday things that you know people just did because they had to do. Go to the grocery store and pay a bill by dropping it off in the mailbox outside the utility place or whatever. Uh, Regular everyday things that used to necessitate having to go somewhere externally no longer require that. They are a button push away. They are click on this link in this email away. They are sign into this account away. You know, so it it's most of what I have prepared for our broader conversation revolves around ease of access on behalf of the regular individual, on behalf of just the run of the mill average American citizen. And I wasn't expecting ease of access to kind of that conversation to bleed into this area, but I think we can see that it fits still, right? So, yes, I think that if I was to say, one of the biggest factors that influenced, um, sort of encouraged, I guess, or influenced individuality or greater individuality in a lot of people, technology probably is the number one factor because of ease of access. You can do it from your phone. You can do it from a laptop. You can do it from a desktop computer. You can do it from a watch or a TV, right? So, or a fridge. I mean, there's household appliances that are now part of this conversation. So, yes, I think if I was to say like one thing that has directly influenced a little bit more individuality, I would say it's technology. Because not only does it influence our hobbies uh, or our ability to conduct business, but it influences our just downtime. Like it has largely taken over our ability to spend our time how we want to spend our time. So,
I'm really happy you bring up this concept of ease of access. The fact that everything we could potentially need is a button click away. And there are certainly benefits to this, but there are also potential drawbacks, right? If you are a baseball fan and you want to go watch the World Series, no need to go to a sports bar, a restaurant to watch the game. You can stream it directly. If there's a TV show or a movie, right? you can stream it and almost immediately. Even simple things like going to get groceries no longer require you to leave your home. You can have items shipped to you from essentially any place in the country overnight with Amazon. And it gets to this general sense of isolation. When people no longer have a necessity to leave their homes, you're likely going to see rises in feelings of loneliness, feelings of isolation from broader society. And that problem has gotten so bad in this country that I think it was in 2023, the US Surgeon General declared a loneliness epidemic in this country that was based off of survey data that had found that over or roughly half of Americans say that they report feeling lonely or isolated frequently. And so the way you see this, speaking of those 50%, 150 million people, that can't be an individual personal issue, right? There has to be structural things that are going on that are making people feel isolated, that they no longer have real reasons to connect to people and real spaces to have those human connections.
Yeah, what we were talking about, going out and trying to find coverage of a sporting event anymore. I have grievances with the current NFL football schedule. Okay, I was just having this problem. Not, let's see, what's today? Monday. I was just having this problem yesterday. I was just having this problem Thursday night. I'm like, I want to watch the Raiders Commanders game. Okay, so the first thing I have to do, I have to Google it, and it says it's streaming on these platforms. Option A, option B, option C. Here's how you can do it. Okay, I don't have any of those. Can I find it on local cable? No, it's on Fox. Okay, the local cable. So okay, so I go on local cable and I find the channel, find my local channel that has a football game, but not the game that I want to watch. Okay, so then I Google the schedule again of the Sunday afternoon games, and then I go check a streaming service. Okay, and there's no games on that streaming service. you know, so then I go to another streaming service where I know that there's usually football game coverage. There's no game streaming, even though it's 11 a.m. on Sunday and there's like 7 games happening right now. Apparently, none of the streaming services have a football game playing. So that situation, it was mildly inconvenient. I'm not going to sit here and get on my soapbox and preach about how I want more football coverage, but
I
that.
think we may have just debunked our hypothesis.
But this is
Maybe it isn't so easy to have instant access to everything we want.
this is coming back to the existence of communal spaces, because I was this close to getting in my car and finding the nearest sports bar, because I knew somehow, some way, there was going to be coverage of the games that I wanted to watch. So it was a 2-part problem with a 1-part solution. It was me trying to navigate the confusing, to say the least, new system that has taken over streaming, and 2, just willing to go out and find that said space where I know that the thing that I want is going to be. So I don't know if I'm just looking at it in an overly critical kind of way, but that's just like, to me, that gives further evidence to the need for these places. because I know that I was not the only one. I had to have not been the only one on Thursday or Sunday or whatever the day was for the necessary coverage that I wanted to go out and find that.
I don't think you're the only one, right? When you think of all of these streaming services, just think about how many there are. Amazon Prime, Paramount Plus, Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, Peacock. The list goes on and
Mhm.
on and on. We're
Mhm.
inundated with choices. And part of me thinks the response to that among our generation is simply going to be, why don't I just go find this somewhere in a shared space?
Yeah, yeah,
Instead of looking for a movie on 16 different streaming platforms, I'm just going to go see it in a movie theater.
yeah, yeah. I'm
Why?
just it's no longer about ease of access. It's about just a straightforward solution to the problem that you are experiencing. And the self-defined problem, I guess, because I say it's a problem, but my ability or lack thereof to be able to find proper coverage of a football game is not somebody else's definition of a problem. But
I can think of two really important spaces, though, that have not, and I don't believe they can be replaced by AI, Meta, or any digital platform. And that is concerts and arena sports events.
oh yeah, they'll never.
The problem, though, both of those things are growing wildly expensive. When you look at tickets to popular musicians on tour, tickets are outrageously expensive. Tickets to NFL games, for example, are hundreds of dollars. My concern is that while those with greater access to resources might feel okay, dishing out these expenditures to go to these uh, essentially what are luxury ticket items now, what are the rest of society left with? That's been my concern thinking about this. Is the rest of society left sitting at home streaming Netflix
Mhm.
and continuing to feel that sense of isolation?
And we brought up the plethora of different streaming services and digital platforms that are available to the to us. And we're talking about things like pricing for social outings, or I would like to equivalent that to pricing of just being able to go out and explore. Find a coffee shop, or find a lunchtime restaurant like a diner, or find a breakfast spot, like those random, like run of the mill. I got some time on my hands. I'm going to go do this things may be on the precipice of, dare I say, almost getting priced out, you know? And I want to come back, circle back around to the availability of streaming services. There's so many, each and every single one of them costs X amount of dollars per month. Okay. And when we did not have that access, we had more money to spend elsewhere. And now that this regular part of our lives, or historically regular part of our lives, seeking entertainment or seeking some way to kill downtimes, is becoming monetized, people might be forced to make decisions that they would not otherwise be making. Like, okay, well, I just spent X amount of money on my monthly expenditures. Half of those might be stuff to maintain my own home. Half the stuff might be, stuff that I do for my own pleasure, i.e., i.e. streaming services or subscription costs to whatever program. People are being forced to prioritize where they did not have to prioritize before. So that might be a big contributor to the central problem of this loneliness epidemic is, people are being forced to prioritize in a way that they have never before. And because they are being forced to do that, they might be missing out on those social opportunities, or they might be telling themselves that they can go without those social opportunities willingly. So it could be any number of things, but I think the root of the problem might be that people are being forced to prioritize in ways that they've never had to before. And that is forcing them either by choice or by necessity to miss out on some of the social outings that were considered just regular parts of life before. If that makes any sense, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, it does. And I want to connect this. Both of us love movies. We both love pop culture. And our local community theater, as of today's date, September 22nd, is when we are recording this.
hmm
Our local community theater is set to close in 8 days. And this is something that is not unique to our region, especially during the pandemic. We saw mass closure of movie theaters.
yes,
And let me share a little personal uh, detail with you. When I was 13, I remember distinctly, I grew up with the Star Wars movies, right? I grew up with the prequels. I remember distinctly in 2015 the feeling I had. December 2015, my brother and I went to the movie theater to see the new Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens.
hmm
And there was a sense of, and this might sound really nerdy, but it's the truth. There was a sense of real community there. You were standing in line with a group of people you did not know. You did not know whether they were planning to vote in that upcoming year's election, right? In the following year, 2016. You didn't know what they thought of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. It didn't
hmm
matter. It did not matter. You were united together, watching Star Wars, dressed up like children, eating popcorn.
hmm
And I bring this up as a representation of a broader theme I'm seeing. Think of Black Friday. How many people actually go out and do Black Friday anymore? How many people go and argue over that last Xbox that's on
hmm
sale? Not many. I was, not to bring up Pew Research again, but I was looking at data on trick or treating, both prior to COVID and after COVID. And the numbers are strikingly similar. Even before COVID in 2019, it was something like 20% of parents said that they planned to bring their children trick or treating. 20%.
That's
That's
alarmingly
crazy.
low. Yeah,
And so, like, when you think of your childhood or your youth, your upbringing, what were events that you consider crucial to your kind of socialization, things that brought you closer to your community that I worry that we may be part of the last generation that had these things?
yeah. Oh, geez. Well, trick or treating is definitely one of them. I can remember, it's always living in the Midwest on Halloween is kind of a 50-50 shot. Everybody at school was super excited because we got to wear our costumes during the day at school, and then at home. And then during the day, it was all planning what they were going to do that night, especially if it fell on a Friday or, so, and then you get to the
Which
end.
it does this year. Which
Yeah.
it does this year.
Yes, that's good news. That is good news. I'm talking like a big kid right now, but I don't care. But anyway, yeah, and then you get to the end of that. You get to the end of the day, and you get home, and you have dinner and everything, and then it's finally time to go. And then you're all thinking you're all looking so cool in your costume, and you're gonna be like, "Oh man, this is gonna be so cool! I'm gonna go out with my friends, and we're gonna walk the neighborhood, and we're gonna be in costumes. It's gonna be great." And then your mom stops you at the door and says, "Hey, it's 32 degrees outside. Put your coat on. Cover your costume up." And you're like, "Oh, like, no, no, it's gonna ruin the whole vibe." Anyway, that was the biggest problem for Midwest Halloween kids was having to cover up your cool costume when it was 28 degrees outside on October 31st. But yeah, it was that, and you say, I mean, you bring up waiting for uh, waiting in line for The Force Awakens. Those experiences are for me kind of the defining moments of my youth, being as invested in pop culture and things as I am. I can remember several off the top of my head. I remember going to, especially in 2020. I remember going to the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back in the theater, in our local theater. And I also remember going to the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. And I also remember seeing Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters for Halloween, re-released, of course. Uh, and that happened. A bunch of those re-releases happen um, as kind of a direct result of the pandemic, but um, which I was 19 years old around that time. So I was just coming out of high school and I hadn't started college yet. So I was still very much attached to uh, things like that. And yeah, it's just those experiences, going to uh, being in a time where they promoted, uh, I would say, kind of being apart from one another for your own safety, when we didn't understand, too much about it. Being apart from one another for your own safety, I still found refuge and comfort in those shared spaces. Seeing, a 40-year-old re-release of a Star Wars movie, seeing a 35th anniversary of a Ghostbusters movie, like they were still making an effort to have those events. And being a young person, like I am and I was, I drifted toward those events. So, and I consider them to be kind of defining moments of my upbringing, of my youth. I can remember in 2015 when Force Awakens came out, I didn't get to see it on opening night, and that would have been a Friday, I think. Usually stuff falls like that, and they usually do like Thursday night pre-screenings. I was a freshman in high school, and a couple of my fellow freshman classmates had gone to the Thursday night pre-screening showing before. And I was walking through the lunchroom or the cafeteria, and I overheard one of them say that Han Solo died at the very end, and I hadn't seen the movie yet.
Spoiler.
And I freaked out. I was like, no! Like, the damage had already been done. I heard it, and then I plugged my ears after I'd heard it to try and save myself the news, to try to convince myself that it wasn't true. But yeah, like those instances stick out to you. That was a moment of regular conversation between a group of kids, and even 10 years later, I remember it like it was yesterday. You know, and it's tied to a space where people still came together, even amidst a continental and global circumstance that promoted people to be apart. So, the central theme of this conversation, I think, is the existence and the arguable decline of shared spaces. I think we're just discovering as we go along more and more instances of the power of these places for generations of people, whether it's me and you when we were in high school, whether it's the people waiting in line at Force Awakens that were our age when the original Star Wars came out in 77. It was having still generational impacts, even in a great time of strife and of doubt and of uncertainty. So I don't know. I think I may have gotten away from the from the root of the question, but our youth
No,
is
I
exclusively tied, I think, to stories like this. You know,
yeah, I it may sound trivial to some, right? We're talking about trick or treating and Star Wars. And to some extent, right, there isn't much of a clear connection between that and political polarization, but there is because it's about trust. When the only thing you see about a person is their political identity, you lose their sense of humanity. When you're either A, socially isolated, or B, isolated from those who have a different life story or life background than you, that becomes a very dangerous space. A space of either radicalization or of shutting off dissenting voices. And so while this may be trivial, and while it might be a light topic, I think it's really important that we talk about these things. And I get a sense from speaking to other people in Gen Z, there's a huge push for nostalgia right now. Young people wearing Fleetwood Mac t shirts, although Fleetwood Mac predated them by 40 years.
yeah. What's your favorite
Or,
Metallica song? Enter Sandman.
yes, and you see this reflected in the pop culture of Gen Z. Stranger Things, for example. The
Mhm.
entire show is one big trip for the 1980s. What do you make of this nostalgia? You mentioned going to the theater to see Empire Strikes Back, a movie that came out 20 years before you were even on this planet. Why do young people have such a nostalgia for things that maybe their parents enjoyed when they were kids?
You know, well, give me a second to peruse some of my notes here. I have quite a bit of notes taken on that fact of that search for nostalgia. Let's see. I think, well, let's just look at it from kind of a different angle. So we're talking about the power of nostalgia, in this instance in entertainment. Like you mentioned Stranger Things, and we've talked about Star Wars. I can think, I didn't think I was going to be able to find this many. Uh, I kind of shocked myself a little bit when I actually came upon this number. Just off the top of my head, I came up with five legacy IPs, uh, that are still very much prevalent in today's world, in today's kind of entertainment business. One of those is Star Wars, obviously. Another one is Indiana Jones. A third one is Top Gun. A fourth one, Jurassic World, uh, continuation of the Jurassic Park movies, right? And then five, there was two recent back-to-back legacy sequels with Ghostbusters. There was Afterlife, and then there was Frozen Empire, right? So five different legacy IP and five different legacy sequels made a comeback in 2015 with Star Wars. 2022, I think, was Top Gun, Maverick, and 2023 was Indiana Jones 5. 2015 was also Jurassic World, so you had a double feature, Jurassic Park and Star Wars in the same year. And then 2021, I think, was the first new Ghostbusters movie, and then last year in 24 was the second one. Most of these, like we just established, kind of saw their main successes in the 70s and 80s, but they were successful enough. There's proof of, we know, that they sprouted entire fandoms and dedicated communities that still persist to this day, 40 years later. And it doesn't matter what background you have or what walk of life you come from. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're a Star Wars fan. And if you're an indie fan, you're an indie fan. If you're a Jurassic Park fan, you're a Jurassic Park fan. That simple fact makes a person a member of another community. So, and clearly there is something economically, I think, to be said about the power of that nostalgia and the creation of those communities. Because I mean, look at I did some polling of box office numbers for some of these titles. Force Awakens grossed over $2 billion globally in 2015. Almost half of that entire figure just came from domestic sales from North America alone. And then Jurassic World, same thing, made almost $2 billion globally, with over $600 million coming just from North America, from the United States and Canada. And then of course Top Gun Maverick as well, making a ton of money, right? Almost $2 billion again, with 700 million coming from just the United States and Canada. The fact of the matter is, I think in the case of pop culture and entertainment and its power to connect, is that people love legacy IP. And it goes back, I think, to the conversation we just had about waiting in line for Star Wars. There was, 4-year-old kids there. There was 40-year-old adults there. There was, there might have been even like a pair of grandparents or two in line. You don't know, because that has had those IP and those communities created by those projects, by those worlds, still persist. And just like I said, uh, they love the feeling of being grown adults and having the opportunity still to go see a new Star Wars movie, or go see a new Indiana Jones movie, see a new Top Gun movie. It's kind of in a sense, makes them nostalgic for when you were a kid, you know? Like, you could see that arguably with the Star Wars prequels in the 90s and early 2000s. People were like, "Hey, this came out when I was a kid, like 30 years ago. I'm gonna go again." Right? And then the sequel trilogy comes out. You have an entire new generation, excuse me, of Star Wars fans that have grown up with 4, 5, and 6, 1, 2, and 3, now saying, "Hey, I have an opportunity to go do something that people in my family, friends of my own, got to do when they were my age." Like Force Awakens was my first Star Wars movie in the theater, because I was still just too young to go see any of the prequels in the theater. And Jurassic World, the first Jurassic World movie, was my first uh, Jurassic Park movie in the theater, right? So the fact of the matter is, people love, I think, legacy IP. There are communities built around them, and there is fervent support for each of them. Um, whether you're a Star Wars fan, whether you're an indie fan, whether you're a fan of Top Gun, whether you're a fan of Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, doesn't matter. There is a demand for it, and because there is a demand for it, they keep coming, and they keep generating huge amounts of money. So it's, as much as it is a community kind of driving thing, it's also kind of an economically driving thing, because where producers and where companies see the value of those communities is in how much capital could be uh, potentially generated. So I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent there. I hope it kind of makes sense, but I hope by kind of illustrating some of those numbers and seeing the power of, hearing about, stories of those communities, and hearing about the kind of economic bolstering those big blockbuster films did, there's something to be said there that kind of combines those two things.
Now, this is going to sound like a total shift, but it connects. In 2008, Barack Obama ran on a platform of hope. In fact, at an acceptance speech, he argued that there's no red America, there's no blue America, there's no straight America, there's no gay America, there's no black America, no white America, just the United States. Though a hopeful message, and whether you agree or disagree with that messaging, I think that's really been called into question since that period, right? As to truly how united we are, and whether there truly is a red America and a blue America. And I want to connect this to our conversation about pop culture, because I find your description of these IPs to be very fascinating, but there's also a thought that creeps into my mind. Do you think a movie like Top Gun Maverick attracted a specific audience? In other words, what I'm trying to get to here is, do you think that we're living in a time where, based off of your political ideology, whether you're a Republican, a conservative, a liberal, a Democrat, you are literally living in separate ecospheres of entertainment, of music, of TV?
Yes, I think anybody kind of would be able to look at the 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 spectrum of titles available now and that have been traditionally available, and see that yes, there are certain projects and certain IPs that carry with them certain constituents, right? I think the most powerful and the most recent example that I can see, and I wrote about it quite a bit. Excuse me, was the works of Taylor Sheridan. I'm talking Yellowstone and its two prequels, 1883 and 1923, Mayor of Kingstown, and also now Tulsa King, and now most recently Landman. Ask anybody, especially in the region that we come from, if they've heard of Taylor Sheridan. Yeah, yeah, they have. And I guarantee you they have something to say about either any single one of those projects. That uh, uh, Yellowstone I want to stick with because I think it's the most prominent example. Uh, Never before, I think, has a project taken on such a widespread and such a identifiable is not the right word, but far-reaching identity, right? I always laugh when I like browse Facebook and stuff because occasionally I will see, uh, memes, quote unquote, of characters like from Yellowstone. Most popularly, like I can think of like Rip. I'll see a picture of like Rip from Yellowstone, and it's like, "Hey, this is how I want my men," you know. And it sounds silly, but uh, there, especially from this show, and especially from that world, and the content of the show, being that it is kind of a political thriller and a kind of a uh, mixed in with a western, right? I think it has the power to reach a large audience, but in the area in which we live, in the area in which it popularizes, because it takes place in Montana and Wyoming and those kind of regional states that we are familiar with, it draws a certain constituent of viewers, people that know that life, people that are familiar with that life, people that have seen that life firsthand, right? So I think yes, people are drawn to works of creative fiction or creative nonfiction that that illustrate things that they are familiar with. And given that we live in an area that is so uh, heavily tied in with westward expansion and the cowboy era and uh, stuff like that, that is the most powerful example that I can think of is the works of Taylor Sheridan, be it Yellowstone or 1883 or 1923. People from our area are going to drift closer to it more quickly because it's stuff that they are familiar with and it's stuff that they resonate with. Yeah, you look like you were about to say something else, so I seize my time.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we've gotten to a point in our cultural divide, if we can guess what someone's political leanings are on the sole basis of what they consume. I think of if someone were to approach me and tell me their favorite show was Yellowstone, I would immediately assume they were a Republican. If someone approached me in 2023 and said they connected with Barbie, I would assume they're a Democrat. Now, that's not to say that's a perfect,
Comparison.
faultless.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because there are definitely Republicans who enjoyed Barbie, and I'm sure there are Democrats who enjoy Yellowstone. But as a whole, I think this gets to a broader point that we are becoming more polarized, not just politically, but through our politics. We are becoming more polarized with what we consume. Do you see this as an issue?
I'm not entirely sure how to answer that because I think, in the content that we consume, there are messages to be subliminally picked up on, right? And I was just you see it a lot of times in smaller communities, but uh anytime like anytime like a big press release comes out, or anytime a big, or well, not big, but anytime a noteworthy uh piece of news comes out, you have people that are in comment sections that are responding, you know, positively is not, positively is there, yes, but they are responding I don't know what the word is. I'm struggling to find it, but they are responding objectively, I guess is the word, to what is being presented to them, the information. They are reacting objectively to the information. That's it. Okay. So a press release could come out about, hey, like this new city ordinance is getting passed. Here's when it's happening. Here's what it is. And some people will be like, okay. And that's it. They're just reacting to that information. Other times, you'll browse that same release and you'll see people that are like, well, I don't like that. Nobody else should like that either. And then that's it. There's nothing else that is said. And then there's other people that come on and they say things like they make accusations, right? Accusations that may or may not have anything to do with the information that is being presented, or being information that is concerned in that said press release, fictional press release, whatever it is. They're just completely out of left field, and one has to wonder, why is that being said? Like, there was no ground for it. There was no 1 + 1 = 2, conclusion to it. It was just said. And the thing that it was said attached to has nothing to do with it. And I think that it's something that occasionally I'll see on various social medias. Just you see it in a kind of a boiled down way. People always talk about it on Twitter or like on X, and it's like, somebody will tweet out, "I like pancakes," and then somebody will come in under that tweet and be like, "Oh, so you hate waffles?" You know, you've seen that before, and that kind of comparison, or that kind of rhetoric, I think, is applied to everything. It can be found everywhere. It can be found in political discourse. It can be found in regular conversation. It can be found in entertainment. It can be found in literature, right? So that somewhere along the way, that has become the normal discourse. Somebody will say, hey, this is what I think of this, and I'm going to give substantial evidence. Or I'll say, hey, I just like this. And then out of left field, Something will come that says, "Oh, so you don't like this? Oh, what about this? What about something that is this that is not even connected to what you just told me?" You know? And that can be found everywhere. And I think, kind of speaking to the increased polarization, like through the content that we consume, there is more opportunity for that to take place. It's not something that is going to end overnight with the access that we have to information, with the access that we have to technology. That sort of debate and that sort of discourse is just going to keep happening regardless of what field it is being discussed under. So I don't really know for sure uh, how to concretely combat that problem, but I agree that that problem does exist, and it can be found um, just in almost everywhere you look.
In in political terms, people who study polarization would argue that we're losing what's called as cross-cutting ties, right? Things that have nothing to do with our ideology, yet we are fans of, or we are a part of things that aren't stereotyped to be a part of that identity. And this whole conversation has something to do with stereotyping because we're assuming that, say, someone who watches Barbie is a liberal, or we're assuming that someone who is a big football fan is a conservative, or we're assuming I'm wearing a Lady Gaga shirt. One might assume that someone wearing a Lady Gaga shirt is a liberal. And I think this is symptomatic of a broader problem in society, that we've gotten so far in our divide that one small detail about someone can tell us everything we didn't need to know, even when that assumption might not be correct. And I
Mhm.
want to especially state that there are liberal football fans, just as there are conservative Lady Gaga fans or what have you. And I
Yeah.
think one area of fandom that I think represents this perfectly is Taylor Swift. She's the biggest name. I'm being
I agree.
totally honest.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is the biggest name in music, arguably, in the United States. Certainly one of, if not the biggest. And yet, you don't necessarily know what ideology someone has if they enjoy Taylor Swift. And perhaps that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point of like there, no matter the reach, or no matter the kind of constituents that a piece of media or a piece of entertainment attracts, the fact of the matter is they're still there, regardless of what we may think we know about them. So I think people have gotten increasingly comfortable with making assumptions and not really bothering to look any further or any deeper once they have those assumptions. So, like we were just talking about, oh, you're a Barbie fan, must be a Democrat, you know. Oh, you're a Yellowstone fan, must be Republican, right? Most of the people that, well, I don't want to say most of the people, most people would probably think they were adequate in making those assumptions just like that, and not bothering to look any deeper or any further into it. But that is not just a entertainment problem. That is a problem that unfortunately has just become a part of everyday life now. Whether you're talking about current events like the news, or whether you're talking about entertainment, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about everyday aspects of human life, of our everyday life, people just make assumptions, and they're comfortable in those assumptions by themselves.
We were talking earlier, right, about the importance of shared communal spaces to bring people together. Even in those shared spaces that still exist, Take the movie theater, for example. You cannot escape politics in 2025. I think of the most recent example being Snow White, right? There was a huge argument between the political left and right about whether to support this movie or not. There were boycotts of the movie simply because one of the actors had a political position in which many disagreed with.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that movies and politics should be separated, but my general point is that we've gotten to the point where even these communal spaces that maybe are possibly a potential savior of democracy can't save us anymore because they are infected with the partisan tribe mentality.
Mhm.
And, we can still focus on this, but I do want to shift our attention a bit because you are a huge Star Wars fan. Since the moment I met you, one of the first things I knew about you is you were a big Star Wars fan. And Star Wars has always been political. Although most people don't watch Star Wars to understand the inner depths of political theory, there is politics going on in Star Wars. Just take the original Star Wars, although politics is littered through, especially the original 6 movies. But take the first Star Wars movie. What's that movie about? Well, it's about a small rebellion going up against an empire. Democracy versus authoritarianism. Though I'm not nearly as big a Star Wars fan as you are, I have read bits about the inspiration for the original Star Wars, and it was heavily influenced by the Vietnam War, for example, and Nazi Germany. Right? Star Wars, the Empire, was in large part motivated by history, by political polarization and political violence. And so I'm curious, based on your knowledge of Star Wars, what themes do you see resonate in today's climate?
I think the most prominent, and I'm using just the Star Wars prequels as a to kind of base this evidence and these claims. The central message, I think, of episodes 1 through 3 is to be weary of increasing totalitarianism and increasing authoritarianism. Be wary of anti-democratic things, right? And each of the episodes in the prequel trilogy, episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3, uh, it kind of puts under a microscope different aspects of that that degradation. Most notably, I think, in episode one, the Phantom Menace is largely about the taxation of outlying star systems, um, and a blockade of one of them to force their agreement to sign a treaty. And the central character or the central manipulator at the heart of that conflict is Chancellor Palpatine, of course, soon to be Emperor Palpatine. He is pulling strings on both sides. He's playing political chess while the rest are playing political checkers. Uh, and what he does first, I think, that is most dangerous is he starts sowing the seeds of doubt in the Queen of Naboo. And he tells her, hey, like, look at how ineffective the Galactic Senate is. Look at how tied up in bureaucracy they are. Look at how tied up in the political gridlock they are, right? And he tells her after that, this wouldn't happen if we had different leadership. Wink, wink. And he instills within her enough doubt and manipulates her enough that he gets her to put out a vote of no confidence in the current chancellor at that point in time. Not him, Chancellor Valorum. But he sows enough doubt and sows enough of kind of plays on the larger fears of a queen trying to protect her people, in order to depose somebody and gain their seat. And the other thing that he does that I think is noteworthy is he uses the Jedi as political agents, as a, and this is seen in the very first opening sequence of the movie. I think Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, they show up to the Trade Federation ship to negotiate a deal to end the blockade. When historically, for generations, for like thousands of years in this universe, the Jedi have never been attached to or representative of any way, uh, representative of in any way, larger, political structures. So episode one kind of shows those first initial steps that are taken to destabilize and to kind of take advantage of that destabilization for one's own benefit. And then you get to episode two, and then the central issue of episode two, Attack of the Clones, is the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Clone Troopers, which the Republic has never had in its thousands of years of existing. The Republic has not really had a standing army or a standing defensive force. At least this iteration of the Republic hasn't. And Chancellor Palpatine, newly elected Chancellor Palpatine, is granted emergency powers. And the first thing that he does with those emergency powers is he authorizes the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic. He creates a fighting force, a standing military force that on the surface is being used to combat this external threat of the Separatist Alliance and the Droid Army and so on and so forth. Um, and the enemy, the Separatist Alliance, is made up of that Trade Federation from the first movie, and I think the Banking Clan from another planet they're called. Uh, Really, what all that the enemy is are institutions, a collection of institutions that Palpatine knows he has to get out of the way in order to achieve what he wants. So on the surface, you have an issue that has never been seen before, actions that have never been seen before, taken before, that are being taken for the very first time. Okay, you have that. And then you have you wonder about the precedent that these actions are having. And the Jedi wonder this as well, because with the creation of this clone army, the Jedi become generals. They become military leaders when they are historically just keepers of the peace. They are not meant to be soldiers in any way. They do not want to get involved in intergalactic political structures in any way. And yet they have found themselves, as a direct result of this unforeseen yet power play. They don't know that it is a power play, but it is. They have found themselves swept up directly in the battle against an external enemy. So the central problem with episode two is that, steps are taken to start a war that is going to, without a doubt, have huge implications for all parties involved, whether it's average citizens on Coruscant or Tatooine or another planet I'm trying to think of. Geonosis, that's where that's where the first battle takes place. This is going to have galactic implications. And, people and groups that have not historically had any involvement or wanted any involvement are now involved directly. So you have the second movie kind of just um, exacerbating the circumstances of the first. The first movie was about Palpatine obtaining the position to be able to make those calls. Episode 2 happens, he now has the ability to make those calls. And as a result, he is basically orchestrating a conflict from both sides in order to get what he wants, which is total control over the whole galaxy. And then episode 3 happens, Revenge of the Sith. This is where things get really crazy. So the Clone Wars have been going on for like 5 years, and the Chancellor has yet to give up his emergency powers. And the Jedi are all sorts of suspicious about this. They're like, if he doesn't do it soon, then we need to do something. So now you have this group that has unwillingly been swept up into a conflict that they did not foresee, that they did not want. Now they are being forced to consider taking further political action and further necessary, what they view as necessary action to try and find an end to all this craziness that is going on with the Clone Wars and the situation on Coruscant at home, right? So they've become generals in the army of the Republic, which is they would never would have done. They're thrust into a intergalactic battle, and as a result, the Jedi Council, the highest sort of authority of ancient wisdom in the land, becomes disillusioned. They become so wrapped up in the needs of the moment and in the needs of the circumstances around them that they do not see that the person pulling the strings has been in front of them and under their noses the whole time. They become blind. They become arrogant. They become complacent almost in a way, right? And eventually they do realize, but it's too late. The damage has already been done. The Jedi Council, uh, they go to apprehend the Chancellor and demand that he face trial. And the Chancellor refuses. We have that. I'm sure that people our age know that moment from Episode 3, where Mace Windu and all the other Jedi are in the Chancellor's office, and Mace Windu says, uh, in the name of the Galactic Senate, we are here to you're under arrest. And the Chancellor is like, I am the Senate. He has become so secure in destabilizing an entire republic and destabilizing an entire galactic entity that he now feels that he is in complete control. But uh, there are two groups that are preventing him from obtaining complete control. One is the Separatist Alliance still, and two is the Jedi Council and all the other Jedi that are out in the galaxy fighting the Clone Wars still. He sees both of them as a a problem, a thing to have to get off the board. And so it's revealed that the clone troopers, the clone army, are subservient in a way to the Emperor because they have chips in their heads that are programmed with different orders. And the Chancellor, after the death of the Jedi that have come to arrest him and Mace Windu, presumably, this is the nerd in me speaking, that Mace Windu may or may not be dead. We don't know that for sure. Plenty of people lose their hands in Star Wars and turn out okay. Never mind the fact that he, fell out a 25-story window or whatever. Maybe he'll be back. We don't know. Anyway, with the Jedi out of the way, and with a new apprentice in the form of Anakin, he sends him off to do his own thing. He says, go and take care of the Jedi Council, go and take care of the Jedi Order, and when you're done with that, go and take care of the Separatists. And once they are done, once they are off the board, the Sith, i.e. me, will be in complete control. And we do see that. Those things happen. The Jedi are wiped out through Order 66, and the Separatists are all wiped out via Anakin and the new apprentice to the dark side, the Sith, right? And then the first thing that happens after that is Palpatine uses the circumstances, uses the chaos, and uses the disillusionment of the people to turn it around and have them actually exhibit some sort of fervor for security. And he does this through the creation of the first galactic empire. He uses the circumstances surrounding the ending of the Clone Wars and surrounding the chaos being sowed around Coruscant and around the galaxy to reform the Galactic Republic into the first galactic empire. And he does it through a lens of I am protecting you. Like I'm doing these things to secure peace. I'm doing these things to secure our society. I'm doing these things to make sure that we persevere. And yet, an entire system of interplanetary and intergalactic government has just been toppled, and whole institutions have been wiped out. The Jedi and, Trade Federation, even though they were bad guys, right? They were both victims of a larger player, the Emperor Palpatine. And really, what the whole thing can boil down to, all of the three of the prequels, is using the seeds of doubt and using the seeds of political chaos and fervor to manipulate and come out on top. Like I said, it starts with the highlighting of the Galactic Senate's bureaucracy and political stagnation. Right, endless debates are happening. Nothing is getting done, and that prompts direct action to be taken in the Senate. Like the leader of the Senate, the Chancellor, is deposed, and a new person is elected, i.e., the Chancellor Palpatine, soon to be Emperor Palpatine. And then after that, in light of extreme moves being made by the Trade Federation and the Droid Army and all the bad guys of the day, right? Uh, really unprecedented actions are taken by the Supreme Chancellor. He is given emergency powers, and he authorizes the creation of the first ever standing fighting force. Maybe not first ever, but first ever in that iteration of the Republic, first ever fighting force for the Republic to be used for the purposes of war. And then, as the war rages, for 5 years and nears the end, the Chancellor doubles down on manipulation through his remaining opponents, the Jedi and the Separatist Alliance, and he deals with them. He has the power and he has the resources to take them off the board completely. And once that has been taken, it's kind of the point of no return where people are desperate for a return to security, and people are desperate for a return to peace. And the Emperor uses that fervor to completely restructure an entire standing system, and he creates the Empire. And any remnant or any group of people or institution that was loyal to the Republic, it hunted down and destroyed. We saw it in the beginning of Episode 4. I think some of the original Star Wars movie, if some want to still call it that. I still call it that. But anyway, we see that in the beginning of A New Hope, where the Imperial Council, the leaders of the officers and the generals and such are discussing, what to do with the remnants of the Imperial Senate. And, Grand Moff Tarkin, he comes in there and he says, the Senate has just been, we don't have to worry about them anymore. They're dealt with. So even years after the events of the prequels, the remnants that still existed from that time period, from the era of the Republic, were hunted down and destroyed so that the Emperor and the Galactic Empire may take complete control. So it is a story, I think, about the slow degradation of secure governmental systems through direct manipulation and capitalization on of the fears on the people that inhabit those systems. You know, he played on the insecurities of the Jedi, he played on the insecurities of the Separatist Alliance, he played on the insecurities and the fears of the people that lived on Coruscant, and the people that lived within the borders of the Galactic Republic. Eh, it is just a story about the slow and oftentimes unrecognizable degradation of systems that should be impenetrable, systems that should be sacred and that are sacred for for evil purposes, for purposes that could have further galactic implications down the road. So I don't know, I that's as best as I could think to describe it. Is it's kind of a story of being wary of complete degradation of systems that should be impenetrable.
Now let me do my best attempt to connect this to American politics. If I were to take one thing away from everything you just outlined and connect it to the study of American history and politics, it would be the dangers of placing faith and all of your hopes and dreams and fears into one person, one office of power. I started this project with the promise to myself that I would remain as neutral as possible, and that is still the goal. And I am not here. There is conversation today about whether or not the current occupant of the White House is abusing power. I am not here to comment on whether President Trump is all good or all bad. What I am here to comment, though I won't comment on one particular occupant of the White House, I will comment on the institution. Over the past century, we've seen a degradation of congressional power, a consolidation of central power, mostly in the executive branch. When Americans go to vote every 4 years in presidential cycles, it's often with the goals of voting for someone who can fix the economy, voting for someone who can fix all my problems. And so if I were to say one thing that our audience could learn from Star Wars and apply it to American politics is that regardless of whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, we should always be suspicious of too much power solidified into one office's control, which is my pitch to return congressional power. But we'll save that for another
Right.
conversation. We've covered a lot in this conversation, and a lot of it has not been hopeful. We've talked a lot about the declining role that community plays in American society. We've talked about outright authoritarianism through the lens of Star Wars. We've talked about Americans being divided by left and right, even when it comes down to what they watch, what they listen to. But I want to end on a hopeful note. This is the third time I'm referencing Pew Research Center in this conversation.
I think you really
But
like.
they found, I do, I love Pew. They found that 2/3 of Americans report that they feel a sense of belonging when they share a common fandom or cultural interest with another person or group. And that can be sports, music, or movies. So the question I want to ask you is, we've talked a lot about culture dividing us, but what gives you hope for the future of belonging and community within pop culture and how pop culture can act to unite Americans?
I have a couple of different topics I can speak to that angle. One of them considers a character that you guys have discussed on this show uh, already, and that is Superman. Which I don't really want to beat a dead horse with revisiting such a topic, but I think it is relevant to the conversation that we are that we're having and the question that you just asked of how does pop culture have the ability to bridge people together, to kind of unify people across swaths. And I think that one of the principal instances of being able to unify, or at least being able to know of, is Superman, the character of Superman. Uh, and in terms of like entertainment, being connected to that, just in general, the biggest thing with that, I think, regardless of what walk of life you might come from, or what background you come from, what beliefs you have, at the end of the day, I believe the power of entertainment is that it is humans telling stories about other humans and about the world around them in an attempt to understand it, right? We don't know a whole lot. We think we might know a whole lot, but we don't. And our creative expressions, our are our way of trying to reach out and understand more about the world around us, and try to find out more about what we don't know, or ponder at least what we don't know, and get us thinking about it, right? So, like I said, at the end of the day, we're all human, and at the heart of it, that's the core problem. And I think a character that does this the best for everybody, regardless of what generation you come from, or what walk of life you come from, what background you come from, is Superman. Superman is a character that has been around for the last 80 years, 80 plus years, dare I say, and it is a fact that multiple generations have had their own interpretations of Superman. So I've got a kind of a trajectory of the character that I'd like to cover. First is the Max Fleischer cartoons from I believe 1941 to 43, and Superman in that show, in that cartoon, was portrayed as this figure that is immovable. He is staunchly like anti-fascist and anti-totalitarian. He was like fighting the Japanese, and like I think he was even uh, caught up in the middle of like some domestic conspiracy that involved like a compromised group of spies, like super spies. So at that point in time, Superman was representative of classic American values, of pro-Allied forces values, right? Superman was used as a tool to get people to wrap their heads around what was going on in the broader world. Uh, and then in the 50s, after that, during the height of the Cold War, Superman in the black and white TV show Adventures of Superman was portrayed as, again, a steadfast, sort of uncompromising figure through the lens of traditional mid-century American values, and really, really a big part was that Cold War era patriotism. So that's for that. I mean, everybody's heard that saying, Superman fights for truth, justice, and the American way, right? I think both of those, both the 40s and the 50s Superman, sort of uh, adopt those classic values. Uh, and of course, I mean, Superman is born of by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and I think it was mentioned by your first guest. Uh, and he is very much the product of two ordinary individuals that did face uh, tragic circumstances, and did face circumstances that most people should never have to know, right? And as a result of that, of everyday people trying to make sense of the world around them, and make and come up with a way to to reconcile with the upbringing that they lived. Superman kind of adopts those classic American values of truth, justice, and Now it is a better tomorrow. It is kind of, in a sense, always been that way: truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. But he's been a steadfast figure in American values at this point in time. And then 1978 comes along, and we have the iconic portrayal of Superman by Christopher Reeve, given to us by Richard Donner, and he says the same thing. Even in 1978, he in an interview with Lois, he said Lois asks him like, "Why are you here?" And he says, "I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and the American way." And she laughs at him, and she says, "Oh my God, you're going to end up fighting every elected official in this country." That is an actual line that she says to him when he offers that statement. And I think Superman at this point kind of experiences a little bit of a characteristic shift. Instead of He's kind of embodied as hope and relentless, this sense of relentless optimism, which, as evidenced by Lois's response and kind of the larger metropolis around him, that is an increasingly rare ideology in an increasingly cynical world. I mean, and at the end of the day, there with the '78 portrayal and the '80s portrayal, in that post-war era, Superman kind of embodied what it was to be better. Like, he wanted people to be better. And he was, like I said, relentlessly optimistic that humanity could be better. And he was exemplary of the best parts of people, you know. And at the end of the day, that movie says it perpetuates kind of the message that the human race can rise above such cynicism and be truly benevolent. And then you get to the modern day with a couple of different modern interpretations of Superman. One of them is My Adventures with Superman, which is a really, really great show. And I'm not just saying that as a comic book fan or a superhero fan or even a Superman fan. It's just a good show. My Adventures with Superman focuses on a younger Superman. This Superman knows nothing about his Kryptonian heritage. He just knows that he is a guy with special abilities. And it really, really highlights Superman's duality, his Earth upbringing and his Kryptonian heritage, and his struggle to balance the two. He is both a child of Krypton and of Earth. And in My Adventures, like I said, he knows nothing about his Kryptonian heritage. And in the face of really, really drastic news, uh, in the form of a potential Kryptonian invasion of Earth, because in this timeline, Krypton was a warring empire. He chooses his earthly upbringing and his human values, and he sticks up for Earth, and he actually defends Earth from his Kryptonian home planet, and he challenges his own heritage, and he is very much portrayed as the guy trying to do what's right simply because it's right. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And one other modern interpretation of Superman that does that same thing, I think, is most recently James Gunn's Superman. Demonstrates almost exactly the same characteristics with Superman. He operates on the belief that he is a benevolent force, that he's here to do good and to help and to give the people of Earth, someone to look up to help them be better, right? But when it is revealed that Superman, who is an alien, was actually sent to conquer Earth and to make the human race subservient to him, public perception flips, as we know, and then combine that with Lex Luthor's smear campaign. If you've seen the movie, um, he's hoping to portray Superman as like this untrustworthy, lying, grooming, I think is the word used in the actual movie, all-powerful conqueror. And Superman has to try to convince both him and him of the fact that that's not true. And then also he has to win back the public perception of the people of Earth. And again, he's not forced to do anything. He chooses to embrace his human upbringing and his human values and everything that was instilled within him by his time on Earth. and he's just doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. And I think that that sort of shift in Superman's values and his ideals uh, can be studied through the lens of how long he's been around. So, of course, like in the 30s and 40s when Superman was first introduced, he was a steadfast force that combated these worldly evils, right? And then as time went on and we get into the Cold War, Superman becomes a force of like relentless optimism as a sort of an outlet for people who may have lost their sense of belonging or sense of hope with the possibility of all that could happen with the Cold War conflict. And then in the modern day, in the 2010s and the 2020s, Superman becomes this force of people can be better. And they can be better than me, even though I am exemplary of the greatest parts of humanity. He believes that humanity can be better. And I think those instances of Superman meaning different things for different people in different times is just a testament to the power of entertainment. And you asked me as well what else kind of gives me hope about pop culture and its implications on the political uh, side of things and the institutional side of things is that I'm of the belief that creativity is very important, and I believe that creativity is the source of collaboration. Doesn't matter if you are a aspiring writer, doesn't matter if you are a proven director, doesn't matter if you're even attached to the entertainment industry at all. Creativity is the source of collaboration. Creativity brings you to other like-minded people. It encourages the creation of those communities that we have spent the episode talking about, like Star Wars fandom and indie fandom and other nostalgic fandoms like that. Creativity is what brings those people together and encourages collaboration. So at the end of the day, I mean, what this can teach us, I think, is do not shy away from that collaboration. Even if, you're of the belief that you can't do that. You can't write a story. You can't write a script. You can't, uh, do this or that. You just have to believe that you have something to offer. And if you think you have something to offer, that is going to bring you to other like-minded people. And then there is, what happens beyond that is who knows? But you are finding communities and you are encouraging other people to join those communities by being creative and by being a voice for, hey, this is what I want to do. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to find a way to do it. You just have to have that spark. And once that spark is there, you can do great, the individual can do great things. It can lead the individual to other individuals. And now you have a whole community that is connected to it. So I think at the end of the day, entertainment has the power to instill creativity in individuals. And because it has the power to instill creativity in individuals, that might give them the power and the ability to find other like minded individuals who want to express that creativity, who want to make something of the skills that they have. And really, really awesome, potentially great things can maybe come of that. And it all stems from, just something you like, you know? So it's a combination of creativity and passion. If you're passionate about something, regardless of what it is, like you're passionate about political science and I'm passionate about creative works, writing and movies and TV and novels and things like that. If you have that passion and you have that creativity, there's no telling what kind of good you can do. So, and I think there's evidence here with this platform that you're creating. Like you have said yourself that this is what I want to do. This is what I feel I am being called to do. I'm going to do something about it. And you're surrounding yourself with like minded individuals, people that are willing to help you because they believe in it. And so, really, what we are standing on the precipice of is the creation of one of those communities that we have spent the last hour and 40 some minutes talking about. So I think we've boiled down to the essence of the problem is that you just have to find something that you are passionate about, that you believe that you can do something about. And once you have that, the next steps are clear. Just surround yourself with like-minded people and just start jiving, start talking ideas, start throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks, you know? And I think that power of collaboration is what's going to be the the remedy to some of our issues, you know. I don't know, that might be some of the relentless optimism, but
I think we could all use a lot more radical optimism in the face of cynical times. And I think once you find a community of people who, even if you share disagreements on public policy, on politics, on candidates, whatever it is, but if you find people who have the like-minded nature of peace, love, and understanding for those who disagree with you, you know you have found the right group of people to surround yourself with. If there is one piece of advice that I would take from this conversation if I was listening to it, it's to go touch some grass.
yeah.
It's to it's to go, and this is to myself as well as it is to anyone else. It's to go get involved.
Yeah.
Go find organizations or clubs or groups of people you can work with to do all of the things that we have talked about today. Any closing thoughts, Dawson?
Uh, you know, I think I'm tapped. But one thing I would like to say, and one thing that I think is the source of collaboration, and I made note of this in my notes that both of us have seen. One our friend, our mutual friend Stephen Williams made a great point when you asked him his closing thoughts. He said, always assume when you're asking the question of like, how do you promote respectful dialogues and how do you promote that collaboration, like I just talked about? Stephen said, always assume that the person you're talking to is the more knowledgeable. And I think that is, he actually kind of defined my creative process for me, and I don't even know what that was yet. The heart of my creative process and the heart of that issue, the same, is by assuming that the person you're talking to is the more knowledgeable, you are giving them a chance to express those passions and express that creativity. And once they have, and once all involved parties have kind of laid out, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm thinking, that is how collaboration starts, is by giving other people a chance to express their thoughts and express their passions and really see if they can find that creative spark. So, really, my closing statements are very similar to Stevens, but I think he is right in assuming that if you just let people have the space for a few moments and you let them express their passions and express their ideas and express their creativity, you know, you can come together because of that and maybe unlock something and maybe find the recipe to something great. So, yeah,
And the translation to politics is clear. It's that I challenge all of you to not throw someone to the curb because of whom they voted for. I challenge you to just listen. If someone disagrees or shares a different viewpoint than you, listen, and maybe you'll walk away disagreeing even stronger, but I guarantee you'll learn something about that person or about yourself that you did not know before. Dawson, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, no problem, my friend. It was a joy. It was a joy to have this conversation and to spend time with you. And I'm excited for what you're gonna do, and I'm excited to see the response that this conversation and future conversations have.
All my pleasure.